So we've been talking a lot about the different gametes and sperm and egg and all these different types of reproduction. Let's just quickly go through the different terminology that's used for the different gametes, germ cells, and somatic cells. I think most of us know that somatic cells are just regular body cells: a liver cell, a hair cell, a skin cell, stomach cell, whatever. Anything that's not a sperm and egg is generally called a somatic cell. And that we know that gametes are literally the sperm and the egg. But what about the stuff that makes the sperm and the egg? It's not really a somatic cell because it's not going to go through mitosis. These are going to go through meiosis to produce the sperm and an egg, and those are simply called germ cells. They're diploid just like everything else. They go through the process of meiosis to produce the gametes. So somatic cells are body cells. Germ cells will produce the gametes, and of course the gametes are the sperm and the egg. Well, the sperm and the egg have their own special names. For females, we have the eggs. They're also called the ova. Not the ovum, but the ova. Males produce spermatozoa, which are the sperm. So you'll start seeing these terms a lot more, maybe in some of the stuff that we read. I generally like to call things what they are: sperm and egg. It's just easier terminology, but know that the ova and the spermatozoa are the same as the sperm and an egg. Ovum are would be the ovaries. Spermatozoon are the testes. A little bit of tongue twister there, but you get what I'm saying. So kind of be aware of these terms in case you see them pop up in some of our reading or maybe even on one of the quizzes, and just be aware of what they are. So the process of making the sperm is called, or making just gametes in general, is called gametogenesis. Again, we have that word genesis, right? The origins, the making of something, the beginning. And gametes tell us what we're making. Now you'd imagine that there's going to be a special one for sperm, and there's going to be a special one for eggs. So spermatogenesis is specifically making sperm. Oogenesis, fun one to say, is the process of making eggs. Now, sperm generally go through the standard steps of meiosis that we are used to, which is where you go through meiosis 1, meiosis 2. You have one diploid parent cell that breaks down into 4 genetically unique haploid daughter cells, each becoming a sperm. Eggs follow us kind of the basic steps of that, but not necessarily. There's an extra process in it that involves something called a polar body. So if you wanted to make an egg that is going to be large enough to contain enough cellular material or nutrients to help grow the resulting embryo, you don't want the eggs to be the same size. You want them to be relatively large. Well, that means you have to sacrifice the size of one to grow the size of the other. So whenever a person is making eggs, this happens in females as well, they produce one large egg and one small egg. The small egg is called the polar body. The other one is just generally the egg that is released during ovulation, and if it's fertilized, it will be stuck in the womb during menstruation. Which those 2 cycles are stuff that's in the book. We don't necessarily go over ovulation cycle and the menstruation cycle, but it is stuff that's in the book. So if you want to look over it, it's in there, and it does a great job of going over it. That's more important. That would be more appropriate for us to cover with higher vertebrates rather than with the invertebrates that we'll be covering this semester. So back to the polar body and then the larger egg. So that larger egg and the polar body, usually one of 2 things happens. Sometimes the polar body is simply discarded. That's usually rare. The polar body is still can act as a nutrient supply for the large one. So lots of times the polar body, that second egg that's small, is actually absorbed by the larger egg, essentially, and is used to help aid in the development of the resulting embryo should that egg get fertilized. So yeah, there's a couple extra little steps that go in there, but that's essentially what happens. And that's gametogenesis, spermatogenesis, and oogenesis. All right, so now let's talk about reproductive patterns. And in nature, we see some pretty straightforward, easy reproductive patterns. One of the big ones is called oviparous. Oviparous, ovi meaning egg. It means that if something's oviparous, it lays eggs. So think of all the different things out there that lay eggs. I mean, all types of reptiles, fish lay eggs, all different types of insects, even birds lay eggs. There's even types of mammals that lay eggs. The duck-billed platypus and the echidna are echinoderms, excuse me, monotremes, and lay eggs. And that's how mammals used to do it, because it was a very good strategy for successful childbirth. We found a slightly better one, which is where we carry the baby inside of us, right? Which is why we have marsupial mammals and placental mammals, but we'll get to that in Zoo 2. So oviparous just simply means it lays eggs. So there's another term called ovoviviparous. Ovo means egg, vivi means live, in other words, live birth. Ovoviviparous therefore means essentially it's conceived and develops within an egg, but that egg is held internally inside the adult. Then the egg hatches, and a moment later, or at the same time, the baby is live birthed out of the adult. So if you look at it, it would look like they're just giving live birth. But if you went on the inside and looked, there would be an egg that the baby was developing in, because they're not attached to the mother by a placenta. They're inside of an egg. Therefore, they're oviparous, but they don't come out as an egg. The egg is never laid. They hatch inside the adult and then come out. So it's ovoviviparous. And sharks are a good example of that one. But for viviparous, for live birth, well, mammals are probably like the best example of that. There are some species of snakes, like boas, actually give live birth, but for the most part, mammals. And so you see here, you got a giraffe falling his 6 feet, hitting the ground. It's going to make him cry just like a doctor spanking a baby. And let's wait for it, boom, afterbirth, and the placenta comes out. And that's a key characteristic of all things that are viviparous. They're attached to the mother through a placenta. So if it's in an egg, it's oviparous. If it's attached through a placenta, it's viviparous. If it's inside of an egg and then hatches in the egg and then comes out of the parent, it's ovoviviparous. So those are all good terms to know, and those are all patterns of reproductive patterns. So there's this link on here, and I have it called Sharks Are Awesome. There's actually a link that this goes to. It's also linked in the video section of Canvas. And essentially it talks about shark reproduction, because sharks will show all 3 types of those reproductive patterns rather, that we just went over. So they're oviparous, some of them are viviparous, and some of them are ovoviviparous. You'll even look at interuterine cannibalism, which is a great thing. I think it's so awesome. But definitely click on this video. It's hyperlinked in the notes, and it's also linked in the video sections of Canvas. So definitely go through and check it out. It's only like 3 or 4 minutes. It's very entertaining to go through and watch. So please make sure that you do.